Bulletproof Radio, a state of high performance.
Hey, it's Dave Asprey with Bulletproof Radio. Today's cool fact of the day is that there's such a thing as placebo sleep. For real. Study participants were told that a machine could determine how much REM sleep they had the night before, which was totally not true. They were making that up. And the people who were told that they got a lot of REM sleep did better on cognitive tests than those who were told had less REM sleep, which is way interesting. Speaking of sleep, if you have not had a chance to check out the Bulletproof Sleep Induction Mat, you should check it out. The Bulletproof Sleep Induction Mat is a non-electrical device. You roll it out on your bed, and it has a bunch of specially designed spikes on it that pressure acupuncture nodes. Sounds a little bit weird, but when you first lay on it, your body screams that you're going to die because it's too pokey. After the body realizes that you're not going to move anywhere, it just melts, and you get a huge wave of basically endorphins that are released, and those help you go to sleep quickly and go into like a really deep, relaxing sleep. Sounds too good to be true. Well, when you try it, it's pretty amazing. I really was blown away, which is why it's a Bulletproof product. So it's worth a try. It's a one-time small investment, and you can use it every night forever. So it's a very affordable kind of technology for sleep. It doesn't track anything, doesn't do anything with batteries, but it's really cool. Bulletproof Sleep Induction Mat on bulletproof.com. Today's podcast is going to be a really interesting one, I think, because our guest today is a lifelong farmer with a lot of connections to farmers in Central America, Russia, India, and the US. So sort of the global farming perspective. And his name is Dan Kittredge, and he's the founder and executive director of the Bionutrient Food Association. And back about 7 years ago, he launched the Real Food campaign to get farmers paying attention to making quality food to improve humanity rather than just making like the cheapest food. And the Bionutrient Food Association's objective is to apply bionutrient farm techniques to just change the food supply. In other words, Dan is a man after my own heart. This is so important. If your food is good, you will be good. And if your food is bad, no matter how much you want to be good, you're going to have a very hard time performing at the levels you're capable of performing. So food quality matters so much more than food quantity, although they both matter. If you have no food or only one bite of food every day, you'll probably starve, even if it's really good food. So quality and quantity matter, but quality matters most. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Now, it looks like you are probably at a farm somewhere. You have a cool rock fireplace behind you. Where are you now?
My kitchen table, actually.
A kitchen table in what state?
Massachusetts.
Tell me a little bit about the BFA. What's your mission? What made you 7 years ago, which is, by the way, very early in the overall scope of things, start talking about food quality with farmers? Just how did you get where you are?
Do you want the short, medium, or long answer?
Probably the medium. I mean, I'm sure there'll be lots of things to talk about in there.
Like you said, I grew up on an organic farm here in Massachusetts, and I got married about 10, 11 years ago. And when I got married, I had no other viable skill sets to pay the bill besides farming. And the only model that I had was one that included a lot of work and not necessarily a lot of lucre, not much profitability. And that was in large part due to crops not flourishing. So I started thinking a little bit about the rest of my life and how hard I wanted to work and whether organic was actually better if the plants were suffering due to infestation and disease, et cetera. And started looking more into the literature of what's there. And, guess what? If you don't just look in the mainstream, there's a lot of really good information out there. And started learning from the elders, going to conferences, reading books, taking courses, and practicing on my parents' farm and now my own farm. And realized that if you create an environment where your plants are getting what they need, they flourish. And it's really not just plants, obviously. It's life in general that has certain basic needs. And so this fit in with some of my larger things I'd been working on in my 20s of consciousness and, political revolution and the full gamut. So it seemed to me quite evident that if we didn't increase the nutritive quality of food in the food supply, that we would never be able to really achieve a lot of our other systemic objectives, whether they be carbon sequestration or systemic weakening of agribusiness and pharmaceutical industry, or increasing of consciousness. I think all these things are beautifully intertwined with soil and food. So hopefully we have a chance to get into all that. But it just felt, and the last bit is that my parents actually have for the past 35 years or so run an organic farming organization here in the Northeast called NOFA. So I've got a background in the nonprofit world, and that just seemed like a natural way to take what I was doing on my own farm and bring it to a larger audience. I felt like if I had grown up on an organic farm and in the organic world and was still not really that good of a farmer, probably other farmers and other people trying to live this kind of lifestyle were struggling with the logistics of actually growing healthy plants. There's a few points in there we can.
So this is maybe we talked about so many cool things, but this is maybe the first place to start, which is that farmers have been crammed down. I actually went to school for a couple of years, to university for a couple of years in the Central Valley in California, the farming area that's been hit by the drought. And all of my friends who are farmers or ranchers out there were just like lamenting the fact that you just couldn't make money growing almonds, because then there's an almond processing board. You want to raise chickens or turkeys, and there's Tyson involved. And so they felt like they were land rich, but barely making it paycheck to paycheck. And then one little bad thing happens, you accidentally spray yourself with Roundup and you get sick, and you can't work the farm, you can't afford to pay someone, and boom, you're basically screwed and you lose the farm. So what happens when people switch to an organic, high nutrient food kind of farming? Like, what happens to the farmers personally or economically?
Well, it's a series of components. We grow vegetable crops on less than 2 acres. We have, our whole farm is about 24 acres. We have pastured poultry. We do grass-fed beef. I think, a big piece of the problem for a lot of farmers is they don't realize, at least most of the retail dollar, they're selling into commodity markets. So I think scale is an issue that has to be addressed. Obviously, value add. There's all these sort of rudimentary logistics that are pretty well documented.
I think our listeners, though, probably don't really understand. Like to the average listener, vegetables come from one of two places. If you're like hippie or a biohacker, you go to the farmer's market and you buy them from a guy. And you don't necessarily talk to the guy, or you go to Whole Foods or you go to your normal grocery store and you buy something that is like Mexican organic and you hope it's okay. So like there's a lot of those things that are very apparent to you and maybe somewhat to me, but kind of walk me through, like, what happens to that carrot? Like, how did it get there? And what are the differences?
I'll use an example of potatoes because I think that's a great, here in Maine, we have, it's called the county, which is a rustic county, and there's a lot of potatoes grown in a rustic county in Maine, and farmers get about 6 cents a pound for their potatoes.
6 cents a pound.
Yeah, that's right. That's the price.
Now, just hold on a second. What do potatoes cost? I don't eat potatoes, so I don't know. What do they cost in the grocery store?
I don't buy them, but the reality is that most farmers are operating in a commodity system. They're basically a cog in an industrial wheel, and so a piece of the puzzle for me is stepping out of that and being, at a human scale, at a who was it? Schumacher, Small is Beautiful. Living. For me, it's not. I don't want to be a farmer per se. I want to have a nice quality of life, and for me, a quality of life is one where I don't necessarily have to answer to anybody. I don't have to put on shoes in the morning. I get to play with my kids all day long. I get to be in nature. So it's an overall overarching aspect. The root question you were asking was about what happens when people start growing healthy plants, and the answer is simply that you get more productivity, that your production increases when your plants are healthy because they're not succumbing to infestation and disease, and your cost of production goes down. So it costs you less to produce. So you don't have to charge outrageous sums. You can meet the market price in the grocery store or at the health food store, you can, but you're getting all that money that mostly is going to go to the middlemen. The way the commodity system works is, in Vermont, people grow lots of kale, for instance, and they make it 25 cents a bunch for the kale or 50 cents a bunch for the kale. And in the grocery store, it costs you $2.50 or $3. I don't know what it costs, but most of that's going to go to the grocery store and to the middleman, not to the farmer.
So the middleman goes to like 20 farms. He buys all their kale, puts it into a semi truck, and brings it to the grocery store, and then marks it up some more.
Who knows how many levels of when there are? But one aspect of my success, I think, or ability to work not very hard and make good money farming is to have relationships with my customers, not to be selling into a commodity system. So that's one of the problems with the Central Valley and other major industrial ag regions, is they aren't necessarily working to sell directly to their customers. They're selling into industrial systems. But that's a tangent to the larger conversation, I think.
Okay. Well, I think for people listening, if you want to get bionutrient-rich food, one of the first steps is buy from a farmer rather than from a middleman or a grocer.
Not
Am I right
necessarily.
about that? No? Okay. So you can still get crap food from farmers.
What is bionutrient, for starters? That's a term we coined out of thin air to refer to quality, to refer to flavor and aroma and nutritive value. Because there's a lot of labels out there that are, basically process labels. Like organic is a process standard, biodynamic is a process standard, local is, it's logistical, but it has nothing to do with quality per se. And as animals, we are evolved to discern in a very sophisticated manner relative nutritive value, because that's what makes something good for us, which gives us the vigor and the vitality to be resistant to disease, et cetera, and ideally to function at high levels of consciousness. So, as somebody who grew up in the organic movement, I'm, happy to say, as the literature seems to say, that there's not a major spectrum of variation between organic and conventional as far as nutrition is concerned. There is a major variation as far as toxic compounds are concerned, but it's not about less bad; it's about more good. So we're trying to increase nutritive value, and that does interestingly correlate with flavor and aroma. And it certainly is much easier to have a tomato taste good if it was picked yesterday, ripe, rather than picked a week ago or 2 weeks ago, raw. So local is probably better, organic is probably better, permaculture, biodynamic, et cetera, is probably better. But even within those realms, there's a pretty major spectrum. And what we're trying to focus on here is the actual nutritive value, the actual flavor, the aroma, the how good it is for you, as opposed to how not bad it is for you.
One of my favorite beef rancher on the planet is Glenn Elzinga from Alder Spring, who's been a guest on the show. The guy's a former soil biologist who became a rancher. And we talked about how the way he raises his grass-fed cattle, they walk around on, I think it's 100 square miles of rangeland, and the cows pick the specific tuft of grass that has the right nutrients for them. So cow A picks the right grass, cow B picks the right grass. And few people have had a chance to experience this, but if you live near a really high-quality farmer's market, I used to go to the same farmer's market in California for just about every Sunday. And there's 100 vendors at least. And so in season, there's 20 people selling peaches, and there's 20 people selling peas or whatever. Exactly. And you could sample the different ones. And there's a very noticeable difference in flavor, quality, how long it lasts, whether it spoils quickly or it doesn't spoil quickly, and how you feel when you're done eating it. And after a while, it takes like a year. You're like, you know what? Like the kohlrabi from that guy, like those are the best kohlrabi. By the way, kohlrabi, if you don't know what they are, they're like, you know what they are, but people listening don't. They're like these weird root vegetables that are sort of like an underground.
It's not root. No, it's some way it's above the root.
Oh, is it? It's like
a goiter.
Yeah, it feels like you're eating like a cross between a turnip and broccoli. I don't know. I love kohlrabi.
Yeah, it's right between the turnip and the broccoli. It's in the middle. It's in the stem. It's a big goiter in the stem. Anyway,
so I didn't actually know it was a goiter, but that's cool.
It's functionally like that, yeah.
And the idea that there is some difference, and just like you said, you say it's about consciousness. When you eat the right food that's sourced the right way and cooked the right way with the right kinds of fats, and you didn't damage the food by overcooking it or adding weird chemicals to it, you get a food high. And it's not like an opiate high. It's a food high that's like, wow, everything is running the way it could. And I have this like state of energy that I didn't have before. Yes. And it didn't come even from caffeine. Like it came from the food.
Exactly.
And I work to recreate that at the Bulletproof coffee shop. We have a full restaurant menu in Santa Monica. We're sourcing local, but I don't have a way. And this is important. This is my question for you. Okay.
Back to the crux. Yes.
I care greatly about this stuff. I talk about it all the time. I have chefs who will work with me and cooks and supply chain people, and we buy everything local and organic for the store. But I still don't have a way without going down there and personally knowing the farmers and tasting all this stuff in order to impart the knowledge that I have from being a food hacker to the people who purchase for the restaurant. So I know we make good stuff. I eat the food there. But could I source slightly higher nutrient density vegetables without tens of thousands of dollars of lab testing? How could I do better?
Yeah. Well, that's really gets to the crux of the issue. I think there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle, but what we are, working on, and it's a slow but steady and deep process, is discerning, having the capacity to empirically discern relative quality. What we're, the sort of the fantasy vision here is that you can take something like a pointer from a PowerPoint presentation, and you can flash it at a cucumber, and it'll tell you relatively, poor, average, good, excellent, or a carrot or a cucumber, because those compounds that correlate with flavor and nutrition are, they're aromatic compounds, they're secondary metabolites, there's fancy names for them, terpenoids and phenolics, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they actually have, different, chemical structures and different physics vibrations. And if you flash a light and that light is tuned right, and the meter that bounces back is tuned right, it can tell you relatively this is a high quality cucumber. So our objective with the organization, with the BFA, is not to have a label, not to have a certification process, but to have an empirical metric, which is, what is the science of quality, and can we give that to the consumer? Because, for better or worse, in today's day and age, money seems to talk, and most people seem to buy food, right? Most people don't grow their own food; most people buy food, and a lot of people these days are getting sick. A lot of people go to doctors. A lot of people are on various pharmaceuticals because they're degenerating, they're breaking down, they're physiologically not functioning well, and that has at the root of it, food quality as the solution, as far as I'm concerned. So if we can give consumers who care about their health and the health of their children and the health of their spouses, et cetera, the ability to test quality in the grocery store, at the farmer's market, between grocery stores, however they purchase their crops, I don't really care. But if we can give them the ability to test quality and look beyond the label and the marketing and all that jazz to really empirically what's in and what's not in your food, the idea is that would have a dramatic effect on the food supply writ large. And I can go into that in great detail. I get really excited when I talk about it. But
it's a holy grail of chefs and of people who care about their health, because we talk about this. In fact,
even the government. The government's now in on paying for people's health care. If you want to solve degenerative diseases systemically, if you want to actually cure, it's going to bankrupt the government, right? It's not just foodies. It's down to some pretty powerful forces. It is powerful forces, but sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. No, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, because I'm not, but I can tell you in the U.S., there's in the healthcare system, there's a lot of people making insane amounts of money through the government going bankrupt, and a lot of them are actually controlling the government and all that. And the same thing goes, by the way, with war.
I was an activist for 10 years before.
Okay, got it. When it comes to war and when it comes to medicine, it's bankrupting the government and making a lot of people really wealthy as it happens, and those wealthy people are sort of laughing while it happens. So I'm not sure that the U.S. is properly set up to be incented to fix this, but places like Sweden, where the government actually does pay for healthcare, without enriching people to that extent, they're changing their national guidelines, like around saturated fat and things have happened there. But the whole idea, even behind the recommendations I have in the Bulletproof diet, like there's a spectrum, and it's like, look, you need to eat the right stuff, but you need to eat less of the bad stuff that's in the good stuff and more of the good stuff that's in the good stuff. So food quality is really important, and avoiding all these pesticides and sprays and other toxins in food That's the recipe for people who can think fully with their brain and can live fully in their body and emotions. And that whole creative consciousness kind of power, it comes from food. It doesn't come from food that has chemicals on it that don't belong there, that inhibit mitochondrial respiration or something, right? And it's not like you can do just one of those things. You can be closer to perfect or further from perfect, but if you have nutrient-dense food that's coated in cyanide, it's actually not really okay, right? And our thought process as humans hasn't been like that because historically this wasn't as big of a deal. Like we evolved to kind of eat the food that was near us, that was most available, that was most healthy. And now,
as I understand it, a preponderance of our DNA goes to the function of our nose and our tongue. Bodily function, reproduction, all this kind of stuff doesn't take much DNA. A lot of our DNA is about the sophistication of our senses of smell and taste, because that's so important to our overall function. I mean, you probably are aware of that, but
this is cool because our listeners are always enjoying the conversation, and it's funny because even there's some really primordial sensing compounds. One called substance P, which is around pain perception. Funny, it's activated by cayenne or capsaicin, hot peppers and things like that. Right. It's the same in slugs. Like it's one of the most primordial things in every kind of animal out there because it was one of the most environmental sensing things. It also is tied to dramatic amounts of inflammation. You eat nutrient-dense foods without the wrong stuff in them, and you can affect the levels of substance P in your body. When those are high, your chances of neurodegeneration go up. When those are low, your chances of having a healthy nervous system go up. So you're like, wait a minute. Like whether or not I get MS or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's is tied to the most primordial sensing compound ever that you could use to taste your vegetables.
Right.
Something that makes me laugh, though, is like, okay, we have this amazing array of equipment for sensing the environment around us. And now we're looking at making a laser to test the cucumber instead of just like taking a bite and being, this cucumber sucks.
It's ironic, at least. But the fact is we've been dumbed down, and we have lost we haven't lost these senses. We have not trained them. We haven't. Yeah. What's still boggles my mind is that people don't like things like broccoli and beets, and only when I go and eat store-bought stuff do I understand why, because they taste like crap, right? We do have these sensing techniques, and peaches. I mean, buy a store-bought peach.
They're gross.
And they're repugnant, right? And then pick a peach off a tree that's ripe, and you're like, oh my God, that's a revelatory experience. So,
but I have to say, when it comes to garbanzo beans, like no one actually really likes garbanzo beans, right? Like
my wife makes a pretty good hummus.
Well, let's face it, guacamole or hummus, you're going to eat the guacamole.
I don't know. I mean, if you buy a what are those things? Avocado in the store here, in Massachusetts at least, versus you're in India and you eat like an avocado just picked off the tree. Yeah,
big difference.
It's a totally different experience. The spectrum of variation in these crops is major. But anyway,
I'm with you there. The quality of and the type of avocado.
Yeah.
We were talking about food and consciousness and this idea of a laser that you put in your food. So I looked to solve this problem with coffee because I was having a massive reaction to most coffees. I've lived in houses with toxic mold. Funny of which, this is a soil fungus that's normal in soil that has been amplified in its badness by spraying antifungal chemicals on farms. That's one of the reasons we have this indoor mold crisis where mold grows inside houses and gets people even sicker than it did 50 years ago. And one of the things that affected me personally. So I ran into this with coffee, and we actually do mass spectrometer testing on the coffee, which doesn't show some of the stuff that's in the coffee because of masking. And so I've looked really deeply at this, like, how do I affordably test coffee? Because I like you, I dream of being able to walk into a coffee house, shine a laser at coffee beans, and be like, you know what? Those are clean, I'll drink those. And as it is now, I use laboratory testing that isn't mass spectrometer based for some of the toxins and mass spectrometry for other toxins. So how close are we to having the magic laser that says this is nutrient-dense food and it looks almost the same as this not nutrient-dense food? Are we years or decades away from this?
It's more of a question of money than time.
Okay. How many dollars away are we?
Millions. I mean, less than hundreds of millions, probably more than 10.
Okay.
So it could be decades, it could be 2 or 3 years. Logistically, what we're doing on the back end with the organization is, we've done some rudimentary research projects, but what we really have to do is we have to establish a comprehensive data set for carrots and a comprehensive data set for cucumbers and tomatoes and everything else. What's the spectrum of variation? Minerals, compounds, amino acids, proteins, secondary metabolites, and then what's the spectral signature of these things? And then build a data set and then an algorithm and program a gizmo. So, it's a question of logistics. We are, as an organization, fairly young and fairly small, and that means we don't have the resources. So it's a question of, building the momentum and the relationships. I have to say one thing about the nutrient density term, because it's one that I feel partly responsible for helping to popularize, 8-9 years ago. And I don't know when it happened, about 5 years ago, people started using the term nutrient density. It's like organic. Organic used to mean contains carbon. When I was in 4th grade, I told my science teacher that I was an organic farmer, and she said, "What are you talking about? All farmers are organic farmers. Organic means contains carbon, you stupid child." And when I was in junior high or 9th grade, all of a sudden, everybody knew what organic meant. Nutrient density already means something in food science, and nothing to do with what people who are throwing the word around are using it to mean.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics.
So, it's just a little pet peeve of mine. Mm-hmm. I have actively stopped using the word for the past 4 or 5 years because it already means something, and that is nutrient density in food science means, kale is more nutrient dense than rice because kale has more nutrition per unit calorie on average than rice does. But nutrient density of kale is considered to be the same regardless. Nutrient density of rice is considered to be the same regardless. So when the foodies who are on the cutting edge start, bumping up against the food scientists, there's going to be maybe some tension. For me, that's why we created the term bionutrient, because we want to use a term that doesn't already exist and define it empirically so that we can actually come out with solid science that is irrefutable, that says this is higher quality than that. More nutritious, more flavorful, more aromatic. I don't like to use buzzwords. Nutrient density is becoming a buzzword. I think that's really, it goes to faddism and sort of simplicity of thought. So I like to have it be more of a complicated conversation. We're talking about nutrition and flavor and aroma, health-giving attribute. But anyway, just to say that.
Let's talk a little bit more about how screwed up nutrient density is, because I think a lot of people listening to this is an eye-opening conversation for them. A while back, one of the vegan authors of the Radical Low-Fat guys it's all about aggregate nutrient density, and what they're doing is they're looking, they're incorporating the water value of food in there. They're saying, so in this much of this thing, if you ignore water, there's this much nutrient if it was grown in soil. So they look at a table from 1950.
On average.
On average, right.
Which doesn't average.
Exactly.
It's a fraudulent concept.
So
aggregate density index. You're talking about Joel Furman and with foods.
I am indeed.
The anti-scale.
It teaches you to eat foods with no energy in them, so you're constantly hungry, right?
Because I don't know else. I just know that about the average, which misses the point.
Well, the average misses the point because the idea, well, there's two things. One is you'll be hungry all the time because the most nutrient-dense food ever is a handful of multivitamins. Like there's almost no calories and it's just vitamins. Of course, you'll starve to death if that's all you eat and your liver will shut down. So that's kind of a problem. So nutrient density doesn't work from that thing. And unless vegetables have been bestowed alchemical powers to generate minerals when there are none, you cannot say that this spinach has iron in it unless the soil had iron. So the fact that spinach a long time ago had iron in it when someone measured it in at UC Davis in 1965 doesn't mean that your spinach you're buying at the grocery store has any iron in it.
In fact, the USDA data is categorical in this fact and says basically that average nutrient levels in crops have been decreasing since they've been documenting it for the past 80 years.
Yeah.
Right. But most importantly, there is no aggregate that is, I'm buying the aggregate bag of spinach. You're buying spinach, which is somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And if you can't discern that, then you don't really know what you're getting. Anyway, I think we're on the same page here.
We are. But for people listening who say, I get all my nutrients from my food, no, you don't. You don't have any idea what's in your food, is the God's honest truth. Even if you go to your farmer's market and you buy from the person with the most dreadlocks, it doesn't matter. You don't know what's in there.
The question is, how does it taste?
Yeah.
If you buy organic carrots that taste like soap and are somewhat repugnant to you, that is your body telling you relative quality is crap, right? I mean, it gets down. We don't need a meter.
Yeah.
We only need a meter if we want to deal with industry and agribusiness and the food supply writ large. I mean, I had this conversation with a guy at Whole Foods who was fairly high up a few years ago when I was talking to him about this gizmo, and he said, not a freaking chance that we're going to put any money into this to help you do it. But when you do get the money and you're well on the way to it, if you wouldn't mind giving us a heads up, we will tell all of our growers that they have to meet standard. Basically what he said is, when you know you're 2 years out from having this tool, come tell us. We'll tell all of our growers they have 2 years to meet standard, because they know the importance of this. They understand the importance of quality and nutrition, and they're happy to collaborate. So I think, from a strategic standpoint, if we want to affect the food supply writ large, we want to affect consciousness writ large, we want to affect carbon sequestration, agribusiness, I think, we do have the power, we the people, with the money we spend buying food, but we need to be, we need to use science and we need to use technology, because those are the modes of the age to hide behind to facilitate our objectives. That's the basic pitch.
It's a powerful pitch. Now, have you looked at doing an X Prize about this? Are you familiar with the X Prize Foundation?
I am very open to collaboration and support.
All right.
Yeah, I know there's lots of money out on the West Coast. Various big money people and good ideas. Yeah,
I'll do my best to see that Peter Diamandis sees this.
It's about relationships.
Yeah.
It's all about relationships. So if you know somebody who knows somebody, I'm more than happy to fly out there and have a conversation.
I will. Yeah. I'll make sure that I get this into the idea thing. I know a lot of the innovation members for the X Prize board. These are the guys who decide where the next X Prize will go. Like we just had an X Prize come out for education. Like, how do you make it so you can get basic numeracy and literacy for less than $100 on a device that can teach kids with no adults present, right? Like, that would change the world. So that's something that I was like, all right, I'll help to promote this. Like, this is really important. So that's something that's happening. But this is the type of thing that prizes might be really helpful for. So no promises there, but I will make sure that the people who make those decisions have this in their idea bucket list, and I'm sure that many, actually I know many of them will hear this interview. So there's that, and there's also crowdfunding, because if it's a matter of $10 million, that's a lot for crowdfunding. But if you can get some progress with even $1 million and then get more investors, there are lots of investors who would do something like this, assuming that the science can happen in a reasonable amount of time, and it might be, but this is a world-changing idea.
We can go into the details of the labs we're working with and the PhDs that are organizing the research project. And I mean, we've been trying to keep a fairly low profile and let our actions speak louder than our words, and build the foundation of an organization and a concept and a strategy, more than go out and run after money and make a big hoo-ha. I think we're in a place right now, actually, where we're willing to make more noise and start reaching out, because we've got the people, we've got the staff, we've got the professional, PhDs to do the job properly, and we've got the labs to work with that are not charging us an arm and a leg. As you know about, a phytochemical analysis for a carrot's like $400. Like, sorry,
we spend a lot on
carrots is a lot of money. That's only carrots.
Yeah, we spend a lot on testing coffee, and it's one of those things where I have one set of processing and really a set of growing techniques, and it's really tough. And there's other things I want to test that I can't test right now, because then the coffee would be more than $1 a pound more expensive. And consumers are willing to pay for a certain level of quality, but ideally, what you're talking about is essentially free. You buy a device, you put it at the grocery store so people can just use it, and the net cost per test approaches zero. And
what we're talking about here, I mean, ideally, so this is the logistics. I have definitely been, approached by people who are willing to put venture funding in, and the idea there is that they own it. And I mean, what we're trying to do with a nonprofit is to say this should be an open source data set. This should not be proprietary. This should be transparent, and anybody who is curious or suspicious or critical or anything can look at it, can look at all the science, can look at the information. They don't have to trust us. They can actually do their own due diligence. And anybody who wants to manufacture a tool, here's a data set. If you can build a tool that can do it, go for it. We'll give you our seal of approval. We're talking about, ideally, this is a couple $100 gizmo. This is a the price of a smartphone, and really ideally, couple generations down, version 2.0 or 3.0, it is an app that can be downloaded onto your smartphone, and your smartphone camera can take that picture. As I understand the technology and logistics, it is entirely doable. Anyway, yes,
it'll happen, and there's.
I thought we were going to talk more about agronomy and how to actually build soil and grow healthy crops.
Oh, we will talk. We'll talk about that, but I mean, what we're talking about here is how do you create disruption? How do you hack something that really needs hacking? And when I put on my sort of venture capitalist hat, and I've worked on Sand Hill Road at Trinity Ventures, who are now backers of Bulletproof. There are lots of examples. Well, it wouldn't, but for people listening, probably some of them have heard of it. There are lots of business models around open source where, investors put money in, yet there is an open source data set. Anyone who wants to can build a widget. So there's probably a way to get.
I'm sure it can be done. I know it can be done.
I think so too, and it would be one of those world changing, really big things, which is pretty exciting.
Can I go into some of the implications, the world changing implications, just because I think it's important. So just because I'm really a farmer and I'm not a VC guy. My understanding is that every green leaf has, what makes it green is chlorophyll, and what is in chlorophyll is a chloroplast. So every green leaf you see is full of chloroplasts. And what happens in a chloroplast is that carbon dioxide and water and sunlight are turned into sugar and oxygen. And in a healthy plant, one that's not fed soluble nutrients, not fed an NPK diet, whether organic or conventional, a healthy plant takes 2/3 of that sugar it manufactures and injects it into the soil to feed soil life, because the soil life is the ones who can actually solubilize the soil, get the copper and the zinc out of the soil, digest it into a protoplasmic form, and feed it to the plant. So foundations of how plants grow is they make sugar, they inject it into the soil to feed soil life, who then go out and solubilize the soil and feed it up to the plant. And a corollary of that process is you're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil. My understanding is you can increase organic matter levels by 0.5% a year simply through growing plants. Not adding compost, not bringing in mulch, simply growing healthy plants sequesters carbon. And if you were to apply that conceptually on the world's agricultural lands, we're talking like 3 or 4 years to sequester all the carbon that's been added to the atmosphere since 1750. Anybody who's got a problem with global warming, this is your answer: healthy food. Growing crops, actually growing healthy food, not only is it good for you, it's actually good for the environment, systemically, deeply, profoundly. I'm not talking about the aquifers and the dead zones, and not even talking about all that kind of stuff, but some of the more deeper systemic stuff.
It matters how we grow, because one of the guests I was on, I think it might have even been Glenn from Alderspring, was talking about how if you go to where they're growing genetically modified corn and you scrape the soil, it's like sawdust. The top 12 inches, there is no life in that soil.
Precisely.
It's just holding things up. So you're not getting the carbon sequestration from those crops.
You're burning off carbon and turning it into the atmosphere. My understanding is that there's more carbon in the atmosphere from agriculture than from burning hydrocarbons. Agriculture has burnt off the topsoil, which is primarily organic, burnt off the organic matter and turned it into CO2 in the atmosphere. And that's what chemical farming does. That is the...
Did you just say that vegans are responsible for global warming? I think I heard you say that.
Nothing of the sort.
Just kidding.
If you are eating high-quality garbanzo beans, you are helping sequester carbon. If you're eating low-quality garbanzo beans, you're helping burn off the soil. It has everything to do with the quality of the crop, not the crop itself.
It has to do with the quality of the crop.
Chickens, the whole thing.
I'm with you there. And one of the arguments that constantly happens in the blogosphere is I'm like, look, no, grass-fed or don't eat it when it comes to animals, for exactly that reason, in addition to animal cruelty, in addition to supply chain and number of deaths per calorie.
Health, for that matter.
Oh, well, yeah, that whole living a long time thing is kind of important. But yeah, all of those reasons. And the same thing goes for your carrots. And that's one reason why I live on a 32-acre organic farm. And it's not all a farm. In fact, it's only like a half-acre farm now. But we grow all of the food it takes to feed my family on my property. Why? Because I think this is the best way I know of to live forever. And I'm still a half hour from an airport. Like, I'm not in the middle of nowhere. But I changed my life dramatically because my own research tells me this is the way to do it. And No, for most of my life, I haven't done it this way, but I've gone to the farmer's market and I've intentionally focused on quality food and getting the best butter. Actually, it matters because it matters for the environment and it matters for the way my brain works. And
your children, if you've got children, right? I mean, you want them to be strong and intelligent and sentient, healthy. It's foundational. The food they eat it's foundational. Their function, I think.
It's become apparent to me. My first book was about epigenetics, how the environment, including food, affects multi-generations. And it was, what do you do as a human who wants to have healthy grandkids and healthy children and smarter kids? And there's 1,300 references in that book. And you know what you do now, or what you are capable of doing now, is in some meaningful part determined by the food your grandmother ate.
Yes.
And when I look at what we've done to our food and what our grandkids are going to look like, the movie Idiocracy seems to be like a good model. And
that's why we have, epidemic levels of degenerative disease. We are devolving as a species because of the quality of our food. You got a problem with the political debate. You have a problem with the low level of, intelligence in the political debate. It's because there's a low level of intelligence, which is because we have a low quality of food. I think, for me, all these things are beautifully interrelated.
They are.
And growing and eating high quality food is one of the most activist, radical, political, spiritual, economic, philosophical things you can do, on an actual, a real level.
Okay.
Anyway.
Now the slightly skeptical biohacker in me is going to say, all right, you and I are clearly in alignment. I eat the most badass food on the planet, as far as I get. Like I do this by design. I pee in my own garden, and I have the most expensive pee on the planet, according to Men's Fitness this month, right? Because I take a lot of vitamins. So if some of the vitamins get washed out of my system, I don't care. I give them to the garden.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. There's an argument about should you take vitamins or not.
We can discuss that. That wasn't the point you're making.
No, it wasn't. And it was that if someone is out there saying, all right, I'm in a situation where I'm not going to get the most badass food on the planet because I can't afford it, because I'm in a city, because I'm traveling and I'm on an airplane, whatever the deal is.
Yes.
It seems like you can take whole food concentrates, so-called superfoods, although a lot of those are full of garbage, or you could even take minerals, like specific chelated forms of minerals that have been fermented or bound to amino acids and all the things you can do. You can take those as an insurance policy on top of your food and move the needle in the right direction.
Okay.
What do you think about that idea?
I think it's probably better to supplement your diet, and I think there's probably a bunch of good science out there, and there's a lot of good companies providing high quality supplements. I think we evolved to eat food.
We did.
So for me, it's a question of the systemic supply chain. And sure, people have their crisis management strategies. I don't think we belong in the cities in the first place.
We don't.
I think, what's exciting to me is because it's getting so difficult out there with all the economic, logistics, it's more and more feasible for people to buy 5 or 10 or 20 acres for $10,000 or $20,000 and set up their own operation. I travel around the country, North America pretty much at this point, and give courses to growers about principles of biological systems. How do you intelligently work with the land to grow high quality food and ideally make a living as well? There's a lot of really inexpensive land in this country. There's a lot and beautiful, beautiful, wonderful land. Now I think, getting the hell out of the city is probably not a bad strategy. That may be too much of a jump, but
it's not, depending on what your career is, it's not that big of a deal. So many big companies allow you to remotely work now. My sister works for a big company.
Not that you want to work for a big company. But
well, a lot of people, a paycheck, health insurance, you got kids. There's nothing wrong with working for a big company. I did for 20 years. Startups, they keep getting bought. And really, the value of a paycheck can buy the farm. Literally, you can buy the farm with your paycheck.
No, absolutely. Great. It's a transition process.
My sister did that. Like she works for a big company. She moved out of a big city. She lives in the middle of nowhere in Washington State with a farm and sheep and every other kind of animal you can think of. And she's happy as a clam. And it's that kind of situation where you can apply money to the problem. But most people listening to this, even if they're fantasizing about getting out of a city, unless they've reached some economic level of success to be able to say, all right, I'm going to change my career. I'm going to change my income level. I'm going to go and do something I know nothing about, which is run a farm. They're going to have to call you and learn how to do a farm or someone like you. But for everyone, so that's the 2 to 5% of people who listen to this.
Right. That's probably a minority, even though, 2 generations ago, 85% of people lived on the land. I don't see any reason why it can't happen again. But
it is where I live. So I'm in they call it the Sun Belt. There's bananas that grow literally in Canada. There's bananas that grow 2 miles from my house. It's not that warm here, but it's pretty darn warm. It's very much like California during summer, and winter it doesn't freeze much. So I'm seeing a huge influx of very wealthy people from around the planet. Even a lot of Chinese multimillionaires. They're saying, wait, there's a place where there's clean air, clean water, clean food, and I can get enough property to have a farm. I'm in. And then they're buying 5 to 20 acre plots. And it's happening all over the country and all over the world.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best investments you can make. But for all the people listening who aren't going to do that, which is the majority, what are they going to do this year? Like based on your knowledge, if you were sitting at home right now, what would you tell them to do? All right, so you've got to have high quality food or like bad stuff's going to happen. And we don't have our laser spectrometers that are going to tell us what food is high quality. What's like give me the first couple steps that you should do just to take advantage of this knowledge.
I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, but I think in most cases, people are probably ingesting things that are, processed and preservative laden. And I think, simple whole foods is a good foundational place. I think if you actually buy whole grains, brown rice in a 50-pound bag, or, we're talking about garbanzo beans for some reason. Garbanzo beans, I think.
I don't like them. That's why.
A lot of those things, you can, if you start with the raw ingredients, unprocessed, you can dramatically improve the quality of your nutritive inputs. It's a whole life thing. I don't know that there's any simple one answer. If you've got a backyard and you can play around on your 2,000 square feet, you can grow a hell of a lot of food. I mean, if this is a fantasy that you have, start practicing now. It depends entirely on the individual and their age and their their health and their other logistics. But all right, I don't see any reason why we don't begin to move more. I think there's a lot of hype about technology and computers and connectedness and cyber stuff. I mean, I think reality actually isn't that bad. And if the more we can, unplug from our screens and engage in the real world, it actually fulfills you deeply on multiple levels. And I think a positive state of mind is profoundly valuable. You can have a great diet and still be bitter and sour, and you're going to get sick. So it's not just about the food. It's about your whole state of being. And I find taking my shoes off and playing in the dirt and, hanging out with my kids actually leaves me feeling better. So I think it's a whole lifestyle thing. I think we're animals. I don't think we're, these constructs of mechanized society. I think we belong in nature. We belong outside, in community, in relationships. I don't know. I'm not giving any kind of a good answer.
Those are reasonable answers. And I actually want to go more into the cyber thing with you. And okay. I think I can predict your answer, but I'm not sure. All right. I see aquaponics happening. I see people talking about vertical gardens in cities. What's your take on, okay, we're all growing pot in shipping containers now, commercially for medical use and all. Should we be growing, should I have LED lights and chemical inputs? Like, can I grow nutrient-dense vegetables in a closed system in order to feed people in cities?
I like soil. I like plants. How much money does it cost to build the infrastructure? I mean, I see these aquaponic systems and these farm in a box things. I'm like, somebody is doing that, and they're pitching it and they're selling it because they're making money off of it. I can do that kind of production, tenfold for 15% of the investment, right? I'm growing a lot of salad greens right now on my land. I'm selling, probably 80 or 100 pounds of mesclun mix and arugula and spinach a week here in November in Massachusetts with no power, no heat, a metal hoop with a layer of plastic over it. It's called a hoop house.
Yep.
I've got a few different hoop houses. So, I would say land is wealth. Land is, is where you should be putting your money, not in all these fancy systems. I think it's not a wise use of money, personally. But if you want to stay in the city and you want to do the vertical thing, I'm not going to say don't. I don't think it's the most pragmatic solution. I don't think it really is solving the problems, the global problems. I'm not so much concerned about Americans per se, really, because I think we're actually relatively comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm much more concerned about people in other countries and other, it's now called the developing world, used to be called the third world, where people are starving to death, and they're literally leaving the land because the land will no longer grow anything. And I mean, if you're talking about hundreds of millions of people and quality of life for people, it's wealthy, Western, North American people is not my concern. It's really Asia and Africa and places like that, South America, Central America, places where people are really struggling and where the land is worn out, where the green revolution, where agriculture has historically just worn out the land. We can do so much. We can do so much for so little money to transform this planet, to solve our systemic issues of poverty and global warming, and I mean, real serious issues with an understanding of biological systems. What is life? How does it work? What does it need? That's really more where the pitch and the strategy of the organization is how do we work to revitalize land? How do we work to build soil and have all these other corollary benefits? And food quality is where we've been focusing overtly, because a lot of people these days buy food. And so if you want to reach to the larger audience, you have to talk about food quality. But yeah.
And end of the day, human performance and human consciousness is directly correlated with soil quality, and we've been just messing the soil up for a long time. So I fundamentally believe that, and a lot of the things that I do in my business and just in my personal life are around making sure that at least for my family and for the people that are the people who I can influence, that we start working to fix the problem. So we're in alignment there. And there's a question, Dan, that I've managed to ask almost every guest on Bulletproof Radio, because we're up at the end of the interview.
Yeah.
And it's, given all the stuff not just about this, but your life's experience, if someone came to you tomorrow and said, look, I want to be better at being human. This goes right to that consciousness thing that you've alluded to several times. Yeah. But I want to be better at everything I do. What are the 3 most important things I should know?
You want a quick answer to a deep question.
At least 3 buckets. They don't have to be that short, but
what is a human? I spent a little over a year of my life in India, and a lot of that was up in the Himalayas, because I had come across the wisdom of the East, which is, I think, a deep science. Metaphysics, talks about other frequency ranges, not just
Which part of the Himalayas?
The Indian. It used to be called Uttar Pradesh. Now it's Uttaranchal. Maybe you've heard of Rishikesh. Basically, the Ganges, from the Gangetic Plain up. So the foothills of the Ganges and up into the foothills of the Himalayas and up into the Himalayas. Various ashrams.
Okay. The reason I ask is I've been to the headwaters of the Ganges, Mount Kailash, and spent some time in Nepal and Tibet and the Himalayas as well. So, so just wondering if we were in the same spots, but we weren't. Anyway, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt your answer.
The headwaters of the Ganges is Gangotri. If you've been to Gangotri, I've been to Gangotri and Gangnani and all the way. Yeah. I think that, here in the West, we don't understand the science of consciousness. Yeah. I think that, reality, the universe, I think that God and nature and science and love are synonyms. I think that, there's 2 basic forces. There's love and there's fear. There's, light and there's dark. There's attraction and repulsion, love and fear. And getting, in tune with that and humble about that and, working to look within and take yourself. I think we're spirit incarnate. I think. That's my. I just wasn't. I think. I feel like I know that. And so, operating from that foundational precept of love being all there is. I think Jesus was onto something. I think Jesus said that the body is a temple. That it's not about going to a church or ashram or a temple or a, whatever your name of your church is. It's about being present in this physical form and experiencing reality deeply on multiple levels through it. So this is what I talk about with consciousness is I think we are hardwired with the capacity to experience multiple octaves, multiple frequency ranges. We talk about the chakras and the meridians and all this kind of stuff, which is the science of the East, and not just the liver and the gallbladder, but the heart chakra and all that kind of stuff. So I started university as a music major. And I ended up with a history degree, but my understanding is from physics, 20th century physics, quantum mechanics, is that most of reality is either dark matter or dark energy. Most of reality can't be found on the physical plane. And so if we want to be real about life and where we're at and everything we're interacting with, we have to take into consideration that most of reality is not on the physical plane. And I think all of our tools, all of our microscopes, our telescopes, all the tools we have are tuned in the physical plane, and that's why we can't find most of what we call dark matter and dark energy, because it's on a different frequency range. It's like the octaves in the piano keyboard. There's high C and high C and high C. Those octaves we can't experience with our tools in our Western science, but we do have a tool for experiencing them, and that is the body. And only when our body is vibrating harmoniously, only when it's coherent, can we experience those aspects of ourselves. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question at all.
I think you did. I appreciate it.
But yeah, it's just, I think being, I don't know. I mean, I don't maybe remember the exact question. What are three things you do?
Three things you should know if you want to perform better. And what you're talking about is the consciousness or spiritual side of performing better. Like you got to know what you are and things like that. So
only when you're grounded in your deeper self can you be a better person.
There you go.
And your body is your tool for experiencing reality. And so when your hormonal system is not working because you don't have the elements necessary to build your hormones in your body and your food, then you're biochemically imbalanced and you can't operate at a higher level. So, eating good food that has a full spectrum of nutrition in it is foundational for system function. But if you don't expand your perspective beyond the physical plane, I think you're never going to be fulfilled. Things like, love, when you don't know what love is until you experience it, and you're like, oh, that's what they meant by love. Right? It's an experience. It's a visceral experience. And, that's what the body's for, is to help us experience and know reality. And I think the more in tune the body is, the less we're on pharmaceuticals, the less we're dulled down, the more sensitivity we have, the more we can be attuned to these things. So awesome. I'm not being very eloquent right now, but there's a few.
No, I think people are really getting some value out of that. So thank you for sharing that. It's actually not the easiest question to answer, right? Just on the spot.
Well, I feel like you're done. The time's up, so I'm not. Time to probably digress. I've got a pretty good shtick, but it takes like at least 10 minutes to lay it all out.
We are up on the end of the show, but that's a really good answer, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. Where can people find out more about your work, the Bionutrient Food Association, maybe your technology, getting involved in that kind of stuff? Like what's the URL people should go to download? It's
bionutrient.org. It's a singular, bionutrient, just those two terms, put together.
.org.
Okay. .org. Yeah, we're a nonprofit educational organization. We're not a for-profit. We don't, what we do primarily is courses for growers. What is life? What is the biological system? How does life work? How do you work with it? How do you take your land, your soil, and identify what it needs and address it systemically? It's really pretty rudimentary. It's pretty simple. It's just not a heavy, cost or effort. It's more about being able to view the land as a living organism, and providing for it what it needs to flourish. You can really do very little as long as you do the right things and stand back, and life flourishes. That's what's so exciting to me. Is so much of the land on the planet is weak and worn and weathered, and it needs so little. A little bit of copper there, some cover crops over here, some boron over there, a few small things at nominal cost, then you can really, kick things into much higher gear. So
awesome. Thanks for continuing your good work. What you're doing really, really matters. And it's one of those things where the input's here and the result is there. And humans as a species are notoriously bad at correlating events that happen over long periods of time. And you've clearly dialed it in. It is about the soil. End of the day, just everything we do is about the soil, and you're working to fix it and give us tools so we can make better choices. And I appreciate that kind of work. I appreciate that kind of dedication. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much for having me on and your work with spreading the word. So.
Well, hopefully about 1 million people will download this over the next month or so. So that's meaningful because
that's a pretty big number. Yeah,
getting the knowledge out really, really matters. And I'm grateful that you're doing the incredible work that we just tried to summarize in just an hour. So for people interested, go to bionutrient.org and check it out. And have an awesome day, Dan.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, which I'm hoping you really did, that was a really great conversation, go ahead and buy better vegetables. That'll actually make a difference, not just for how you feel and how you perform, but it makes a difference for everything that happens up the supply chain. And if you can buy better vegetables from the person who grew them, you're actually changing the economics for that person, which means they can do better things to make better soil. So do your very best. That's something that I do every day. And I don't only eat vegetables I grow, I eat vegetables that other people I know grow. And sometimes I even buy them from the store. But the idea is to do everything a little bit better. It doesn't have to be perfect. So take that knowledge, go out, do something cool with it. And while you're at it, go into iTunes and say, I liked this, or share this on Facebook.